My grandma left me, her 50 million hotel empire, but Mom's new husband took control. Then Grandma did this. My name is Alice Bennett. I'm 22 years old, and I live in Boston. I was sipping cold coffee in my grandmother's old study when Mom burst in with her new husband. Richard, we're taking over the hotels, she declared, smiling like it was a charity. Richard stood behind her, smug in his designer suit, holding a briefcase. Your grandmother's empire needs modern direction, he said. They didn't even ask me. They just assumed they could erase me. That was the moment I realized they weren't expanding the business. They were stealing it. I just graduated with a degree in architecture. I thought my life was about building things. I didn't know it would be about fighting for what was already built. This is my story. It's about my family, my grandmother's legacy, and the betrayal that almost cost me everything. Before I tell you how everything flipped, like and subscribe. Drop a comment. Where are you watching from? My grandmother, Eleanor Bennett, had been dead for exactly 7 days. The house was still. It was too quiet. It still smelled like her. A faint mix of expensive perfume and old books. I was sitting in her study, at her massive oak desk. I had been there for hours. I was holding her favorite pen, a heavy silver one. I just held it in my hand, trying to feel something. Trying to feel her. My coffee was cold. I didn't care. The silence of the house was what made their entrance so violent. The study door flew open and slammed against the wall. I jumped, and the heavy pen clattered onto the desk. My mother, Linda, stood in the doorway. She was wearing a bright yellow dress. It felt wrong. It felt loud. The whole world was gray and sad, but my mother was dressed for a garden party. Behind her stood Richard. Richard was her husband of 6 months. He was all sharp angles and expensive cologne. He wore a dark blue suit that probably cost more than my first car. He held a leather briefcase in his left hand, holding it like it was a weapon. Alice, honey, my mother said. Her voice was too cheerful. Oh, good. You're in here. She walked in, looking around the study. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at the furniture. She ran her hand over a bronze statue on the bookshelf. We need to talk, she said. Richard stepped in and closed the door softly behind him. The soft click of the latch sounded final. We're taking over the hotels, Mom announced. She smiled at me, a wide, bright, empty smile, like she was giving me fantastic news. I just stared at her. My mind couldn't catch up to her words. What? Richard stepped forward, placing his briefcase on Grandma's desk. He pushed aside a stack of her old notebooks to make room. I flinched. Your grandmother's empire needs modern direction, Alice, he said. His voice was smooth like oil. It's all a bit dated. We're going to streamline things. Streamline? I finally said. My voice was a whisper. Exactly, he said, flipping the latches on his briefcase. He didn't open it. He just rested his hands on it. Synergy? Optimization. We're prepared to take the company to the next level. International expansion. I looked at my mother. Grandma we haven't even... The will reading isn't until tomorrow. My mother waved her hand, dismissing my words. Oh, that's just a formality, honey. We all know she was leaving the company to the family. To me. She looked at Richard and he gave her a small, tight smile. It was a look I had never seen before. A look of conspiracy. Richard has already been in contact with the board, Mom said. He's been working on this for weeks. We wanted to wait until... Well, we wanted to wait. But the business can't wait for grief, Alice. My stomach turned cold. For weeks? Grandma had been sick for months, but she had only been in the hospital for the last 2 weeks. He had been planning this while my grandmother was dying. You've been planning this? I asked. Richard laughed. It wasn't a nice sound. Alice, this is a $50 million corporation. It's not a lemonade stand. It needs strong, experienced leadership. Not a child who just finished college. A child. That's all I was to them. I had spent the last 3 summers working by Grandma's side. I had reviewed blueprints. I had sat in on budget meetings. I had learned the Bennett way of doing things. Grandma always said, "Details, Alice. The guests are in the details." But to them, I was just a child. I worked with her, I said, my voice shaking a little. I know this business. You played at this business, Mom corrected me. Her voice was sharp now. The fake cheerfulness was gone. You were her little shadow. It was cute. But this is the real world. Richard has run companies. He knows what he's doing. I looked at Richard. His eyes were flat. He wasn't looking at me like a stepfather. He was looking at me like an obstacle. We're selling the main property first, he said, tapping his briefcase. It's old, it's losing money. We'll use the capital to rebrand the Boston and New York locations. Sell the main inn? I stood up. The chair scraped loudly on the wood floor. You can't. That was her first one. That was her home. It's a sentimental dinosaur, Alice, Richard said. And sentiment is bad for business. They didn't ask me. They didn't consult me. They didn't even see me. I was just a piece of furniture in the room, something to be moved or ignored. I looked from Richard's cold, smug face to my mother's bright, eager one. She was excited. She looked like she had just won the lottery. Her own mother was gone and she was celebrating. That's when I finally understood. This wasn't about modern direction. This wasn't about streamlining. This was a theft. My mother and her new husband weren't just taking over the company. They were erasing my grandmother. And they were erasing me. Get out, I whispered. What did you say? Mom's smile vanished. I said, get out. I pointed to the door. This is her study. Get out! Richard snapped his briefcase shut. We'll talk tomorrow, Alice. After the formality. Try to get some perspective. He put his hand on my mother's back and guided her out of the room. He closed the door, leaving me alone in the silence. I sank back into the chair. The room felt cold. I looked at the heavy silver pen on the desk. The fight hadn't even started, and I already felt like I had lost. To understand what they were trying to steal, you have to understand my grandmother, Eleanor Bennett. She was not a soft woman. She was built from granite and willpower. She started with nothing. In 1968, she bought a broken-down 10-room roadside inn in coastal Maine. She used her entire life savings. Everyone told her she was crazy. She told me stories about it. How she scrubbed the toilets herself. How she cooked breakfast for the guests in the morning and did the books at her kitchen table at night. How a banker once told her to go home and bake cookies. She told me she smiled, thanked him for his time, and then went to his competitor and got a loan to build a new wing. She put that first banker out of business a decade later. That one inn became 2, then 5. 50 years later, Bennett Hotels was a $50 million chain of luxury boutique hotels. We had locations in Boston, New York, Savannah, and Charleston. Each one was unique. Each one was perfect. Grandma was brilliant. She was relentless. And yes, she was terrifying if you crossed her. She didn't shout. She would just get very quiet. She would look at you, and you would feel your entire backbone dissolve. She demanded excellence from her managers, from her staff, and from her family. Especially from her family. My mother, Linda, grew up in that long, powerful shadow. And she hated it. My mom didn't want excellence. She wanted attention. While Grandma was building an empire, Mom was drifting. She tried being an actress. She tried being an artist. She tried being a lifestyle blogger. She married 3 different men looking for something. Money, status, and easy life. She never wanted to work. She just wanted the rewards of work. Grandma paid for the acting classes, the art supplies, and the divorces. But she never gave Mom a job at the company. Your mother sees the hotels as a bank, Grandma told me once. We were looking at blueprints for the new Savannah location. She doesn't see the people. She doesn't see the work. She just sees the money. Then she looked at me. I was 19. You, Alice, she said, tapping the blueprint. You see the bones. That's why you'll be great. I love those bones. I loved architecture. I loved how a building could make you feel safe, inspired, calm. When Grandma's health started to decline a few years ago, I stepped up. I was getting my degree at Boston University, just a few miles from the corporate office. I started as her intern, then her assistant. By the time I graduated, I was running the entire design and renovation division for all 5 hotels. I wasn't just playing office. I was managing million-dollar budgets. I was hiring architects. I was on site, wearing a hard hat, making sure the crown molding was perfect. Grandma called it my training. My mother called it my little hobby. I remember one dinner, about a year ago. I was showing Grandma my final designs for the new rooftop bar in Boston. It's brilliant, Alice, Grandma said, studying the drawings. The sightlines are perfect. You use the space. My mom walked in, sipping a glass of wine. She glanced at the plans. Oh, that's so cute, she said. Look at you with your little drawings. It's nice you have something to keep you busy. I felt my face get hot. Mom, this is the final project budget. It's a $2 million renovation. She just laughed. Well, don't mess it up, sweetie. Grandma didn't laugh. She looked at my mother with those quiet granite eyes. She won't mess it up, Linda. She's a Bennett. She builds things. She doesn't just decorate. My mother's face tightened. She hated being reminded that she wasn't part of the real family business. She finished her wine in one gulp and walked away. After she left, Grandma put her hand on mine. Her skin was thin like paper, but her grip was strong. "Don't you ever let her make you feel small, Alice," she said. "Your mother is weak. She attaches herself to power because she has none of her own." Her words were harsh, but they were true. And as I sat there in the study, listening to my mother's footsteps fade down the hall, I realized Grandma was right. Mom had attached herself to new power. She had attached herself to Richard. And they were coming for everything my grandmother had built. The shift started when Grandma got sick. At first, it was just slowing down. She was diagnosed with congestive heart failure. Some days she was fine. Other days she could barely get out of bed. I moved back into the family home in Boston to help her. I managed my university classes online and ran the hotel projects from her study. We spent our evenings together. We would talk about the hotels or architecture or just watch old movies. It was sad watching her get weaker, but it was peaceful. Then my mother started visiting. Suddenly, Mom was there all the time. But she wasn't there for Grandma. She would arrive in a new outfit, kiss Grandma on the forehead, and then spend the next 2 hours in the living room, on her phone, taking important calls. She would post photos on social media. Her, smiling sadly, holding Grandma's hand. The caption would say, "So hard being a caregiver. Family is everything. Family first." Brave it made me sick. She wasn't a caregiver. She was an audience member. And then one day, she brought Richard. "Alice, Grandma, I want you to meet someone," she announced, walking into the sunroom. Richard glided in behind her. He was tall, tan, and had perfect bright white teeth. He wore a suit but no tie. He looked like a man from a magazine. "This is Richard Thorne," Mom said, blushing like a teenager. "He's a business consultant. He's amazing." Richard shook Grandma's hand. "Eleanor, a pleasure. I've heard incredible things." "Mr. Thorne," Grandma said. Her voice was weak, but her eyes were not. She studied him. "Richard is helping me with my lifestyle brand," Mom said. "Oh?" Grandma asked. "I thought that brand was..." On pause. "He sees its potential," Mom said. "He's all about streamlining assets, leveraging core strengths." I watched Richard. He wasn't looking at my mother. He was looking around the room. He was looking at the paintings on the wall, the antique furniture. He was looking at the house. He was assessing its value. He turned to me and smiled. "And you must be Alice, the architect." "I'm a student," I said, humble. "I like that." He winked. I didn't like him. I didn't like him at all. They got married 6 months later. It was a small, fast ceremony at the courthouse. Grandma was too sick to go. I was the only one there. I stood as the witness, wearing a simple black dress. My mother wore white lace. It didn't feel like a wedding. It felt like a transaction. A merger. That night, they came back to the house for a celebration dinner. It was just the 4 of us. Richard was in charge. He opened a bottle of $500 champagne. He talked the entire time. He talked about synergy and optimization. He kept asking Grandma questions about the hotels. "Eleanor, have you ever considered franchising? You're sitting on a gold mine of untapped brand potential." "My hotels are not a franchise, Richard," Grandma said. She barely touched her food. "But the name is Bennett Hotels. It sounds like luxury. We could sell that name. Put it on towels, on bathrobes, on lesser hotels." "We will do no such thing," Grandma said. My mother just giggled. "Oh, isn't he smart, Mom? He has so many ideas." Later, when I was helping Grandma to her room, she gripped my arm. Her fingers dug in. "Alice," she whispered. She looked scared. My grandmother never looked scared. "What is it, Grandma?" "He's not a businessman, Alice," she whispered, her voice urgent. "He's a shark. He's a shark that smells blood in the water. He's just..." "Slick," I said. I didn't want to believe her. I didn't want to think my own mother could be so stupid. "No," Grandma said. "He's dangerous. Watch him. Watch your mother. She's a fool, and he knows it." I wanted to tell her she was wrong, that Mom was just lonely, that Richard was just ambitious, but I didn't believe it. And she didn't either. Grandma died 3 weeks later. She passed away in the hospital, in her sleep. I was holding her hand. My mother and Richard were not there. They were in New York, scouting locations for my mother's brand. I called them. My mother sobbed on the phone. loud, dramatic sobs. They arrived back at the house the next morning. I was at the kitchen table trying to make a list of people to call. I hadn't slept. My eyes burned. Richard walked in. He was wearing a crisp white shirt. He was freshly shaved. He was carrying his laptop. Tragic, he said, setting his laptop on the counter. Just tragic. My mother walked in behind him, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. Now, Alice, Richard said, opening his laptop. We need to discuss the leadership transition for the company. I just stared at him. The words didn't make sense. Leadership. Transition? I said. She just died. Last night. And the board needs to be assured of a steady hand at the helm, he said, typing. Business doesn't grieve, Alice. We need to announce a new CEO immediately to prevent the stock from fluctuating. He wasn't grieving. He wasn't sad. He wasn't even pretending. My mother blew her nose. Richard is right, honey. He's going to step in as interim CEO, just to stabilize things. He looked up from his computer and smiled at me. Don't you worry. Everything is under control. He wasn't comforting me. He wasn't mourning, he was celebrating. He had finally gotten what he wanted. The next day, we all gathered at the lawyer's office. The office was downtown, on the 40th floor. It was all dark wood and thick carpets. It smelled like old money and paper. My grandmother's lawyer, Mr. Harrison, had been her lawyer for 30 years. He was a small, neat man with wire-rimmed glasses. He looked sad. He looked tired. My mother and Richard sat in the front row of chairs facing his desk. My mother was wearing a white suit, a bright snow-white pantsuit with gold buttons. It was completely shockingly inappropriate. She looked like she was about to board a yacht, not attend a will reading. Richard was beside her, in his usual dark suit. He was pretending to comfort her. He had his arm around her shoulder, rubbing her arm. He kept whispering in her ear. He looked bored. He kept checking his watch. I sat in the back row, alone. I wore the same simple black dress I had worn to their wedding. It felt like the only thing I owned that made sense. A few other relatives were there. My great aunt, who looked confused, and 2 cousins I hadn't seen in years. They just looked greedy. Mr. Harrison cleared his throat. We are here today to read the last will and testament of Eleanor Bennett. He put on his glasses and picked up a thick document. I'll skip the legal formalities and get to the bequests, he said. He read a few small items. Grandma left $50,000 to her sister, my great-aunt. She left $20,000 to her driver, Samuel. She left a collection of paintings to the Boston Museum of Fine Arts. My mother was tapping her foot. She was impatient. Richard leaned over to her. Get to the good part, he whispered. I heard him. Mr. Harrison looked up over his glasses right at Richard. He did not look pleased. And now, he said, his voice becoming very clear and loud, we come to the main assets of the estate. Specifically, 100% of the shares and all controlling interest in Bennett Hotels, LLC, and its subsidiaries. My mother sat straight up. She actually stopped breathing. Richard leaned forward. He had a small, tight smile on his face. He had won. Mr. Harrison took a deep breath. Per Mrs. Bennett's final wishes, I read the following. To my granddaughter, Alice Bennett, I leave full, complete, and sole ownership of Bennett Hotels and all its subsidiaries. It is hers to manage, to grow, or to sell, as she and she alone sees fit. The room was completely, totally silent. The only sound was the air conditioning. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I thought I had heard him wrong. Me? I looked at Mr. Harrison. He was looking directly at me. He gave me a very small, very tired smile. Then I heard another sound, a sharp clack. Richard's expensive Mont Blanc pen had fallen from his hand. It hit the polished wood table and rolled onto the floor. His face was white. His smug smile was gone. He looked like he had been slapped. But my mother's reaction was worse. Her smile didn't just vanish. It cracked. It froze on her face and then shattered. Her mouth fell open. Her eyes, wide and furious, snapped from Mr. Harrison to me. What? She hissed. The word cut through the quiet room. What did he just say? That's not possible, Richard said, finding his voice. He stood up. That's a mistake. She was sick. She was not in her right mind. I can assure you, Mr. Thorne, Mr. Harrison said, not even looking up. Eleanor Bennett was of perfectly sound mind when she signed this document 3 months ago. I was there. Her doctors were there. It is ironclad? 3 months ago? My mother shrieked. That was after our wedding. She knew exactly what that meant. Grandma had met Richard, assessed him, and then changed her will. She had cut my mother out completely. "This is an insult," my mother yelled. "I am her daughter, her only child. She can't do this." "She can, Linda, and she did," Mr. Harrison said calmly. I was still speechless. My hands were shaking. I looked down at them. I was the owner. I owned everything. All of it. Grandma hadn't just left me the hotels. She had left me the power. Richard's face had turned from white to a dark, ugly red. He stared at me. He wasn't looking at a 22-year-old girl. He was looking at the person who had just taken $50 million out of his hands. He grabbed my mother's arm. "We're leaving." But my mother started to cry. They were real tears this time. Tears of rage. "We are leaving," he repeated, and he pulled her out of the chair. They stormed out of the office. My mother slammed the door behind them. The other relatives started muttering. I just sat there. I felt cold. I felt terrified. It wasn't a gift. It was a declaration of war. And Grandma had just pushed me onto the front lines, alone. "Miss Bennett?" Mr. Harrison said gently. I looked up. "Congratulations," he said. "You have a lot of work to do." The will reading was a shock, but the real theft happened a week later. I tried to take control. I really did. I spent the first few days with Mr. Harrison going over the legal documents. There were so many papers to sign. I was officially the owner. I was the 100% shareholder. I was, on paper, the most powerful person in the company. On paper. The next Monday, I drove to the corporate headquarters in Boston. I was terrified. I felt like a kid playing dress-up. I wore my best black suit, one Grandma had bought me. I put my hair up. I tried to look older than 22. I walked up to the glass doors of the building. I held my old employee keycard. I swiped it. The light flashed red. Access denied. I frowned and tried again. Access denied. A new security guard I didn't recognize stepped out of the booth. "Can I help you, miss?" "Hi, my keycard isn't working," I said. "I'm Alice Bennett." He looked down at his list. He frowned. "I don't have an Alice Bennett on the employee register." I'm the owner," I said. I felt ridiculous. He gave me a look. "The sure you are, kid look. I need to see some ID and I need to call upstairs." My face burned with humiliation. I had to stand in the lobby like a stranger while he called. "Yes, sir," the guard said into the phone. "She's right here." "Yes, I understand." He hung up and looked at me. His face was blank. "Mr. Thorne's office is on the 10th floor. He's expecting you." Mr. Thorne's office? It was my office. It was Grandma's office. I took the elevator up. The doors opened. The 10th floor lobby was different. Grandma's style was classic. Warm woods, soft lighting, landscape paintings of her hotels. This was not that. The warm carpet was gone, replaced by gray, polished concrete. The walls were sterile white. The friendly receptionist, Maria, who had been with Grandma for 30 years, she was gone. A young woman in a tight black dress sat at a glass desk. She didn't look up when I walked in. "I'm here to see Richard Thorne," I said. "He's in a meeting," she said, typing. "You can wait." "I'm not waiting," I said. I walked past her toward the big double doors of Grandma's office. "Hey, you can't go in there," she yelled. I pushed the doors open. I stopped. The entire office was gone. Grandma's huge oak desk, her bookshelves, her chairs, all of it. Replaced. Richard had installed a massive gleaming glass desk. There were black leather sofas, a giant abstract painting on the wall that looked like spilled ink, and Richard was sitting behind the desk. In the CEO chair, he was on the phone. He held up one finger telling me to wait. My mother was there too. She was sitting on one of the leather sofas, flipping through a copy of Vogue. I just stood in the middle of the room. I was shaking with anger. "They're selling my office," I whispered. My mother looked up. "Oh, Alice, don't be so dramatic. Your grandmother's furniture was ancient. Richard had it all moved to storage, or sold." "I don't know." She went back to her magazine. Richard hung up the phone. "Alice, glad you could make it. What is this?" I said. "What are you doing in my office?" "It's my office, Alice," he said calmly. "I'm the acting CEO." "No, you're not," I said. "I'm the owner." The will was clear. "I'm in charge." My mother sighed, a loud, annoyed sound. "Alice, honey, stop it. You're too young to manage this. You're just a girl. You're grieving. Richard is just helping." "He's not helping," I said. He's redecorating." Richard leaned back in the chair. It was Grandma's chair, just recovered in black leather. He smirked. "Sweetheart?" he said. and that one word made my skin crawl. Running hotels isn't a hobby. It's not one of your little school projects. Ownership and operations are two very different things. What does that mean? It means, he said, leaning forward, that you own the company. Congratulations. You're a very rich girl. But the board appoints the CEO. The board decides who runs the company. The board? I said. Grandma was the board. And then me? Not anymore. He smiled. As your mother's husband, I now represent her interests. And your mother, as Eleanor's only child, has a significant stake in this family. She has no stake, I yelled. Grandma left her nothing. She left it all to me. That's not how the corporate bylaws work, Alice, he said. He was enjoying this. He was toying with me. The bylaws state that the company is overseen by a board of directors. As of this morning, that board consists of myself, your mother, and our new CFO, Mr. Jennings. Jennings? Who is Mr. Jennings? What happened to David? David was Grandma's CFO for 20 years. David. Retired, Richard said smoothly. Mr. Jennings is an old colleague of mine. A brilliant man. And the board, that's me, your mother, and Mr. Jennings, voted this morning. It was unanimous. 2-2. Well, you weren't here. I was appointed CEO. Your mother was appointed president. I looked at my mother. She was smiling. President. She finally had a title. She finally had a job that required no work. You can't do this, I whispered. It felt like the floor was falling out from under me. We just did, Richard said. But don't worry. You'll still get your allowance. As the owner, you're entitled to a dividend once the company is profitable again. We'll be in touch. He was dismissing me. I walked the halls. I saw it all. All of Grandma's loyal people. Gone. Maria, the receptionist. David, the CFO. The head of HR. All replaced by young, slick people I had never seen before. They were all Richard's people. He hadn't just taken over. He had performed a coup. In 1 week, he had changed the locks. He had changed the passwords. He had changed the entire staff. He had seized operational control. I went back to the office. My mother was alone this time. Mom, I said, my voice breaking. Please, you can't let him do this. This was Grandma's legacy. This was my legacy. I was begging. I hated myself for it. My mother finally put down her magazine. She looked at me. Her eyes were cold. There was no love there. No sympathy, just annoyance. I was a problem. I was in her way. Alice, she said, you need to grow up. This is how the real world works. Richard is a brilliant man. He is going to make us all very, very rich. Don't be a spoiled child. Don't ruin this for me. For me. That's when I knew this wasn't just Richard. He wasn't a shark who had fooled my mother. My mother had hired the shark. She had brought him in. This was her plan. She had waited her entire life to get her hands on this company, and she didn't care that her own mother had to die for it to happen. It wasn't incompetence. It was collusion. My own mother had just stolen my company, and she had looked me in the eye while she did it. For a week, I was a ghost. I was locked out of the company. I was locked out of my own life. I stayed in Grandma's house, but it didn't feel like home. It felt like a museum of a life I used to have. My mother and Richard had canceled Grandma's credit cards. They had frozen the estate accounts. I was 22, the owner of a $50 million empire, and I had $200 in my checking account. I couldn't even pay the electricity bill for the house. I didn't sleep. I just walked. I walked through the empty rooms at night holding a cold cup of tea. I was numb. I felt stupid. I felt weak. I felt like the child Richard had called me. Grandma had trusted me. She had given me everything, and I had lost it in a week. One night, it was almost 3 a.m. The house was cold. I was in the study, just sitting in the dark. Richard hadn't bothered to change this room. He didn't care about old books or memories. He only cared about the CEO office. I looked at her huge, empty desk. What did I miss, Grandma? I whispered to the empty room. What am I supposed to do? I felt a sudden, sharp anger. Not at my mother. Not at Richard. At myself. I was behaving exactly as they expected. I was being a quiet, sad victim. I was giving up. My grandmother, Eleanor Bennett, had never given up on anything in her life. I turned on the desk lamp. The warm light flooded the desk. I started to search. I wasn't looking for anything specific. I was just looking. I was angry. I pulled open drawers. Old pens, stationery, half-empty notebooks. I ran my hands over the wood. I had spent hundreds of hours in this room watching her work. She was always writing, always making notes, always hiding things. Never put all your secrets in one box, Alice, she used to tell me, tapping the side of her head. And never, ever trust a smiling man in a cheap suit. Richard's suits were expensive, but the warning was the same. I pushed on the back panel of the main drawer. Nothing. I knocked on the wooden legs. Nothing. Then I remembered. She had a favorite drawer. The bottom left one. It was always full of boring tax files. I never opened it. I pulled it all the way out. It was heavy. I set it on the floor. I reached my hand into the empty, dark space inside the desk. My fingers brushed against something. A small metal latch. I pulled it. I heard a click. A tiny hidden panel on the side of the desk, disguised as simple molding, popped open. Inside was a small, dark void. And in that void was a simple, old-fashioned wooden box. My heart was pounding. I pulled it out. It wasn't locked. Inside, there was a single item. It wasn't a diamond. It wasn't a stack of cash. It was a USB drive. A simple black plastic one. It looked cheap. Taped to it was a small white label. In my grandmother's sharp, clear handwriting, there were 4 words. In case of theft. My breath caught in my throat. I stared at it. She knew. She had known this would happen. She had known they would try to steal it. She had seen Richard for the shark he was. She had seen my mother for the fool she was. And she had left me this. I ran to my bedroom. I grabbed my old college laptop. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely get the USB drive into the port. The drive popped up on my screen. It had only one folder. The folder was titled, The Bomb. I clicked it. There were 5 files inside. The first file was a video. I clicked it. My grandmother's face filled the screen. She looked tired. She was in her hospital bed. The video was time-stamped. It was from 2 days after my mother's wedding. "Hello, Alice," she said. Her voice was weak, but her eyes were fire. "If you are watching this, it means I am gone. And it means your mother has brought that creature into my company. I'm so sorry, my dear girl. I am sorry I left you with this fight. I am sorry your mother is who she is." A tear rolled down her cheek. She wiped it away, angry at her own weakness. "But you are my granddaughter," she said, leaning closer to the camera. "You have iron in your spine. You just need to find it. That man, Richard, he is a thief. Your mother is his key. They will try to lock you out. They will call you a child. They will change the locks. Do not let them. I have left you the tools to win." She looked off camera. "Mr. Harrison, are you there?" My lawyer, Mr. Harrison, stepped into the frame. "I'm here, Eleanor." "Good," she said. "Now, Alice, listen to me. The other files in this folder are your weapons. Do not use them until you are ready to end the fight. 1 shot, 1 kill. I love you, Alice. Now go and save our company." The video ended. I was crying. Not sad tears. Tears of relief. Tears of anger. She hadn't abandoned me. She had been protecting me, even from the grave. I opened the second file. Bylaws, addendum. It was a long legal document. I scrolled through the pages of jargon. And then I saw it. A single clause. Highlighted in red. Grandma had written it herself. Mr. Harrison had made it legal. It was a trigger. It stated that the CEO of Bennett Hotels could only be appointed by the majority shareholder. That was me. It said any attempt to change the CEO or to form a new board without the written and notarized signature of Eleanor Bennett or her named heir, Alice Bennett, would be considered invalid. It said that if this clause was triggered, all corporate power, all bank accounts, and all leadership would immediately revert to the control of the majority shareholder. Richard's board meeting was a lie. His vote was illegal. His appointment as CEO was, legally, a fantasy. He didn't just steal the company. He had done it wrong. The third file was a letter to the real board. The investors. The old-timers who had been with Grandma for 40 years. It was a warning from her, telling them to trust me, and only me. The fourth file was a complete legal opinion from Mr. Harrison, explaining exactly why the clause was binding. The last file was a simple text document. It just had a single sentence. Board meeting, tomorrow, 9 a.m. Grandma and Mr. Harrison had planned everything. They knew Richard would move fast. They were counting on it. I held the USB drive in my hand. It was small, but it was a detonator. I stopped crying. I washed my face. I looked in the mirror. I was not a child. I was not a victim. I was the owner. And I was going to war. The next morning I woke up at 6 a.m. I didn't feel scared. I felt cold. I felt clear. I put on the black suit Grandma had bought me. I I put my hair up in a tight, severe bun. I put on red lipstick, just like she always wore. I looked in the mirror. I didn't see Alice, I saw Eleanor, I didn't take a taxi. I took Grandma's old car, a dark green Bentley. I hadn't driven it since her death. It smelled like her. I arrived at the corporate headquarters at 8:50 a.m. I walked into the lobby. The same security guard who had blocked me was there. "Miss, you can't," he started. I didn't slow down. I just held up my old deactivated keycard. "I am Alice Bennett, the owner of this building. Call Mr. Thorne, tell him I'm here. Or call the police and explain why you're blocking me." His eyes went wide. He picked up the phone. I didn't wait. I walked straight to the elevators and hit the button for the 10th floor. The elevator doors opened. The new cold lobby was there. The new cold receptionist was at her glass desk. "You can't go in," she yelled, standing up. "They're in a board meeting." "I know," I said. I walked to the double doors of the boardroom. I could hear Richard's voice inside. He was loud. He was confident. I pushed both doors open. Bang. The doors hit the walls. The room went silent. It was a long, polished table. Richard was at the head of it, standing. My mother was beside him, beaming. The new CFO, Jennings, was there. But they weren't the only ones. There were 4 other people at the table. 2 men and 2 women, all in their 60s. These were the real board members. The investors. The people who had helped my grandmother build her company. They were the people Richard was trying to fool. They all stared at me. Richard's face drained of all color. He looked like he had seen a ghost. My mother's face twisted into ugly red anger. "Alice, what is the meaning of this?" she snapped. "We are in a very important meeting." "Get out!" Richard was trying to find his voice. "Security! Get her out of here!" I just smiled. I walked slowly to the head of the table. "I don't think so," I said. My voice was calm. It didn't even shake. I looked at the giant projector screen. Richard had a presentation on. It was titled, Bennett Hotels 2.0 International Expansion. There were pictures of Dubai, of London. "You might want to pause that slideshow." "Richard," I said. I unplugged his laptop from the projector cable. "Hey," he yelled. I plugged the cable into my own laptop. I put the USB drive in. I clicked on the file. The red button clause from Grandma's bylaws flashed onto the massive screen. The words were huge. Invalid without the written and notarized signature of Eleanor Bennett or her named heir, Alice Bennett. I let everyone read it. The silence in the room was so heavy I could feel it. The other board members were leaning in. They were reading. One of the women put on her glasses. Richard was stammering. This is fake. It's not valid." She was sick. She was, "I am the CEO." "Actually," I said, "you're not." I looked at the oldest man at the table, Mr. Abernathy. He had been Grandma's first investor. "Mr. Abernathy," I said, "my grandmother left something for you." I walked over and handed him the printed legal opinion from Mr. Harrison. I had printed 5 copies. I gave one to each of the real board members. "That's a legal opinion from Mr. Harrison," I said. "It confirms that this clause is binding. It confirms that the appointment of Richard Thorne as CEO is, and I quote, fraudulent and invalid." Mr. Abernathy read the paper. His face was grim. He looked up, not at me, but at Richard. "Mr. Thorne," he said, his voice like gravel. "What is this?" Richard was sweating. His expensive suit was wrinkled. "It's a misunderstanding. This child, she doesn't know what she's doing." "She knows exactly what she's doing," Mr. Abernathy said. He looked at the other board members. "This document is ironclad. Eleanor's signature. Harrison's notarized." He stood up. He was an old man, but he seemed 6 feet tall. "Richard Thorne," he said, "you have been operating this company illegally. I call for a vote. All in favor of removing Mr. Thorne from his self-appointed position, effective immediately." Every hand on the real board went up. Richard sank into his chair. "It was over. No," my mother screamed. It was a high-pitched, terrible sound. "No, you can't." "We're in charge!" "I am her daughter." She pointed a shaking finger at me. You did this." "You little bitch. You ungrateful child. I am your mother." The room was silent. Everyone just stared at her. I looked at her. I didn't feel sadness. I didn't feel anger. I felt nothing. Just pity. "No," I said, my voice very quiet. "You're his wife." I turned back to the board. They were all looking at me. "My name is Alice Bennett," I said. I am the 100% owner of this company. As of this moment, I am assuming the role of acting CEO, as is my right. I looked at Richard and my mother. My first act, I said, is to call for a full, independent audit of every single transaction, every contract, and every bank transfer made in the last 2 weeks. Richard's face went from pale to a sick, greenish gray. He knew what I would find, and, I said, looking at the security guards who had just run in, I'm having them escorted from my building immediately. My mother's face was a mask of disbelief and pure animal rage. She looked at me like she wanted to kill me. You'll regret this, Alice, she hissed. You'll be nothing without me. I was always nothing to you, I said. The guards took them by the arms. Richard didn't fight. He was a dead man walking. My mother, however, fought. She screamed. She tried to hit the guard. They dragged her out of the boardroom. The doors closed. Silence. I was left standing at the head of the table. I was shaking. My legs felt weak. But I was standing. Mr. Abernathy looked at me. He had a small, sad smile. Well, Miss Bennet, he said, sitting down. Welcome to the job. Now let's see how much damage we have to undo. The boardroom confrontation was a war. The audit was the messy, bloody cleanup. It was so much worse than I imagined. I hired Mr. Harrison and a team of forensic accountants. We rehired David, Grandma's old CFO, the one Richard had retired. David came back immediately. He was furious. He knew where all the bodies were buried. It turned out Richard wasn't just a con man. He was a terrible, sloppy con man. He was arrogant. He thought he was smarter than everyone. He thought he was stealing from a child. He had left a perfect paper trail. In just 2 weeks, Richard had been busy. He had forged contracts. He had tried to sell the original Main Inn, Grandma's home, to a shell company. We looked up the company. It was registered in the Cayman Islands. The owner? Richard Thorne. He was trying to sell himself the company's most valuable real estate for $1. He had also been rerouting funds. Millions. He had drained the company's operating budget. He had transferred over $3 million to his own private offshore account. He had told the board it was for international development fees. He had fired every loyal employee and given his own consultants, his friends, massive salaries. He wasn't streamlining. He was gutting. He was planning to bleed the company dry, sell off the assets, and disappear in a matter of months. It wasn't a corporate takeover. It was a smash and grab. This wasn't a boardroom fight anymore. This was a criminal case. The next time I saw them was not in an office. It was in a courtroom. It was a pretrial hearing. I sat in the front row with Mr. Harrison and Mr. Abernathy. Richard was at the defendant's table. He looked small. His tan was faded. His expensive suit was wrinkled. He wasn't a shark. He was just a pathetic, greedy man. His lawyer tried to argue. He tried to blame the new CFO Jennings. He tried to say Richard was misled by bad advice. The judge, a sharp-eyed woman, was not impressed. The district attorney presented the evidence. The bank transfers. The forged signatures. The deed of sale for the main resort. The judge looked at Richard. Mr. Thorne, she said, this is not bad advice. This is one of the most brazen, amateurish acts of corporate theft I have ever seen. You are lucky Miss Bennet stopped you when she did. The judge froze all of his assets. Every bank account. He couldn't leave the country. She referred the case to the grand jury. He was going to trial. He was very likely going to prison for a long, long time. He was let out. He didn't even look at me. Then it was my mother's turn. She was sitting in the back of the courtroom. She was wearing black. She was crying. She was playing the victim. She had a different lawyer. Her lawyer stood up. Your Honor, my client, Linda Bennet, is a victim here too. She was fooled by this man. She is not a businesswoman. She was blinded by love. She had no idea what he was doing. My mother sobbed, loud fake sobs. I didn't know. I didn't know. He told me he was saving the company. I just trusted him. He was my husband. I almost believed her. For 1 sick second, I thought, maybe she was just that weak. Maybe she was just that stupid. Maybe she was my mom after all. And then, Grandma gave me one final gift. Mr. Harrison stood up. He was holding one last piece of paper. Your Honor, he said, we do not believe Mrs. Bennet, or Mrs. Thorne, was an innocent party. My mother's lawyer yelled, Objection! Overruled, the judge said. I'll hear it. First, Mr. Harrison said, we have bank statements. The day after Mr. Thorne illegally appointed himself CEO, He transferred $500,000 to my client's mother. The memo line on the transfer reads, "President signing bonus." The courtroom was quiet. My mother's sobs stopped. Dead. She wasn't just fooled, Mr. Harrison said. She was paid. My mother's head snapped up. Her face was not sad. It was stone. And second, Mr. Harrison said, there is the matter of Eleanor Bennett's will. He read a final clause. I had never seen it before. It is my wish, he read in Grandma's voice, that my family name represents integrity. Should any member of my family, named heir or not, be found complicit in any act of fraud or malfeasance against my estate, they will forfeit any and all inheritance, trust, or stipend. Grandma had left my mother a small trust fund, a living allowance, so she would never be poor. Mr. Harrison looked at the judge. We believe her acceptance of that signing bonus makes her fully complicit. We ask that the ethics clause be enforced. We ask that Linda Bennett be stripped of any and all financial ties to the Bennett estate. My mother's lawyer was speechless. The judge looked at my mother. My mother was pale. She was staring at me. Her eyes were full of pure black hate. The judge banged her gavel. The ethics clause is valid. The request is granted. My mother stood up. She had nothing. No husband, no money, no daughter. She had lost the house. She had lost her trust fund. She had nothing but the white suit she had worn to the will reading. She looked at me. She said nothing. She just turned and walked out of the courtroom, alone. The weeks that followed were a blur. The company was a wreck. We had no money in our accounts. We had no leadership. We had a staff that was terrified I was 22 years old. I was the CEO of a $50 million company that was weeks from bankruptcy. I called back everyone Richard had fired. Maria, the receptionist. David, the CFO. All the hotel managers. One by one, they came back. They didn't come back for me. I was just a kid. They came back for her. They came back for Grandma. They came back to save her legacy. We worked 18-hour days. We were in the boardroom, but this time we weren't fighting. We were building. We took out a loan. We paid our staff. We called every vendor. I personally apologized to hundreds of people. It was the hardest work I have ever done. I was exhausted. I was overwhelmed. I was running on coffee and adrenaline. After 2 solid months, we were finally stable. The company was safe. The bleeding had stopped. I felt empty. I needed to get out of Boston. I needed to breathe. I drove to Maine. I drove to the original inn. The first one. The one Richard had tried to sell for $1. I walked into the lobby. It was quiet. It smelled of cedar polish and the cold, salt air from the ocean. Sarah, the manager who had been with Grandma since 1975, was behind the desk. She looked up. She didn't smile, but her eyes were kind. "Welcome home, Alice," she said. "Is Grandma's suite available?" I asked. "It's always available for you," she said. I went up to the room. It wasn't the biggest. It wasn't the fanciest. But it had the best view. It was the same as I always remembered. The same wood-paneled walls. The same old comfortable armchair. The same scent of cedar. I stood at the window, looking at the gray, angry Atlantic Ocean. I was the CEO. I had won. I had saved the company. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel powerful. I felt protected. I sank into that old armchair. I finally understood. My grandmother hadn't just left me money. Money is what my mother wanted. Money is what Richard wanted. They thought the company was just a pile of cash. They were wrong. Grandma had left me armor. She knew. She saw Richard. She saw my mother. She knew they would come for me. She knew they would see me as weak, as a child. She knew they would try to steal everything. So she built a fortress around me. The USB drive, the red button clause, the loyal staff, Mr. Harrison, Mr. Abernathy, the ethics clause. Each one was a piece of armor. Each one was a weapon, left exactly where I would need it. She hadn't just taught me about architecture. She had taught me about structure. She had taught me how to build something that could not be broken. This whole thing, it wasn't a tragedy. It was a test. My grandmother hadn't just left me a company. She had left me a test. And she had given me all the answers. She was saying, I knew they would come for you. I made sure they couldn't win. I sat in that chair for a long time. I watched the sun go down. I didn't feel like a victim anymore. I didn't feel like a child. I felt like her granddaughter. I took out my laptop. I opened the company budget. And I got to work. Today, the Bennett hotels have a new motto. I had it carved into the wall of every lobby, built by honesty. Protected by legacy. I moved back to the headquarters in Boston. I walked into the CEO's office. I had all of Richard's cold modern furniture thrown out. I had all of Grandma's things brought back. Her big oak desk is back where it belongs. Her old worn-out armchair. Her books. I took the red button clause, the one I had showed the board, and I had it framed. It hangs on the wall right across from my desk. It's a reminder, my mother, I heard she moved to Florida. She hasn't spoken to me since the hearing. I don't know if she ever will. Richard is under investigation. The trial is next spring. I don't ask about it. It doesn't matter. I don't need revenge. I don't need an apology. I have something better. I have the work. I have the hotels. I have the loyalty of the people Grandma trusted. I have proof that good hands and honest work will always outlast greedy ones. Sometimes, power has to skip a generation for a reason. My grandmother, Eleanor Bennett, made sure of it.